Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zoom into Wine. It's time for the show and your host, Ian Blackburn.
I am super pleased to introduce you to the group tonight. We're live on Facebook where we have a nice audience. And we also have a wonderful group of people who are joining us tonight from all over the place, actually. And it's really exciting to be able to speak with you again. We met you over the summer at our Stars of Pinot Noir and really had amazing success with your participation and interest in the event. And it really was enlightening to me. I'd never tasted your wine before that at that moment, and I was really enthralled with it. And we brought the wine onto the website immediately, and we've had some great success with it. And I just thought you were a real compelling personality, and I see you've got some fantastic company with you tonight.
Yeah, I hope things haven't gone downhill in the last 6 months. We're here in our summer, of course, now, and I'm here with my daughter Libby, who's is our general manager at Astrolabe Wine. So she's the person who runs the business, and I'm the person who runs the winemaking side.
Fantastic.
So nice to have her here, and she's going to be able to help me out when I forget stuff, but also she'll be able to, if there's anybody looking forward to any questions, she might be able to pick those up, and whereas I'm probably too busy focusing on the wine. So she's my wingman today.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's a great idea. Great idea.
And thanks for the opportunity, Ian, and everybody. Thanks for coming along. It's for us in these days of non-travel. It's a fantastic opportunity to talk to people about our wine. And it's really a great format, we find, particularly since we can do it here in my own home garden and be talking to you on the other side of the world pretty much. It's a sensational piece of gear, this Zoom conferencing. So we're appreciative of the opportunity, and thank you for everybody for joining in.
Well, Simon, if you don't mind, and what is your daughter's name? I'm sorry?
I'm Libby.
Hi, Libby.
Libby, yeah. Elizabeth, long hand, but we don't call her that. She's Libby pretty much to everybody.
Libby, I should have asked that before I changed the name, but I was busy on the other line trying to get someone on the Zoom. So I'm going to rename. Are you a Waghorn as well, Libby?
I'm not. Well, I'm still half Waghorn. I'm Waghorn Levitt now, but that's fine. I just Simon Waghorn and friends.
Yeah. Yeah. So Libby's our middle daughter. We have 3 daughters, 2 of them working in the business. One, Arabella, who's our marketing person and brand manager, and she's unfortunately ill with a bad back. And another daughter, Margaret, who's a school teacher. So very lucky to have 2 of the 3 daughters living in the same small town, and 2 working in the business. And so small family business, all about Marlborough and all about trying to do the best we can with the fantastic climate that we've got here in Marlborough, and all the topography and everything, and trying to send to the world some lovely expressive wine.
Great. Well, I would love to have you be able to tell the full story here, and either you or Libby, whoever wants to kick in. What time of the day are we? We're live, by the way, in New Zealand, and it's the day before.
4 o'clock tomorrow. We're in the future.
Oh, yeah. You're perfect.
Yeah, Thursday, a bit after 4 p.m. So very nice, relaxed time for us to be sitting down for a drink on a nice summer's day, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the first topic we always have to engage, being that it is January 2021, is that New Zealand doesn't have a single case of COVID right now, right?
Well, we have a few in managed isolation on the quarantine on the border as they're coming in from other parts of the world. I think yesterday there may have been 7 new cases, but they're all people who have arrived back from places like the UK or the US that have come in and go into hotels near the airport and stay in managed quarantine until they're cleared. So we haven't had a community transmission, I think, since November. So,
and then it was only.
And I think we've had, we're a country of 5 million people. I think we've had about 2,600 cases and about 27 deaths or something like that.
But it's been a long time since we've been basically, especially down here in the South Island, we've been living completely normal sort of life apart from not being able to travel overseas since we got out of lockdown back in May or something. So it's been pretty normal here, actually. Pretty much
Our lives,
regular life.
they're very normal. We have to remind ourselves sometimes to scan in with our COVID app and and sanitize the things, because it's pretty easy to forget about the whole thing and the environment we're in, where we just go about our lives. We are a pretty vigilant lot, and we are making sure that we don't slip back. We realize how privileged we are, and we hope that our government can do what's required to make sure that we don't import one of these more virulent strands that are coming through from the UK or South Africa. So at the moment, we're pretty good shape for sure.
Well, with all the politics in the world, it's nice to see a country that's got some good leadership making a difference. I think we'll look back on this time in our country's history and use it as what not to do in a future pandemic.
Hopefully brighter times ahead for you guys.
Yeah, we feel for you guys, and we understand all the problems you've had in the last year and are still having, but we are thinking of you. But yes, we are very proud of our leadership, and we're proud of the general sort of way the country has swung behind our leadership and sort of towed the line. And
quite well-behaved people.
We're moderate, mild-mannered, well-behaved people. Yeah.
We do what we're told.
But hopefully not too bland, but we're reasonably well-behaved.
Yeah. I think we fall in the category of ill-behaved. So we've definitely all been through it this year. So we've got stories to tell, and it'll make for future. There'll be some really amazing movies made, and there'll be some really good travel. We're gonna all get crazy after this is over.
Yeah.
But thank you guys. It's wonderful to have you here. We're gonna look through a little bit of a PowerPoint as we taste some of the wine. Which wine should we taste first, guys? We've got 3.
I think the Shannon probably, even though it's lightly wooded, I think the Shannon's probably the way to start. Sauvignon Blanc is such a sort of herbaceous hit in the glass that it tends to dominate a glass. Unless you're serving separate glasses, I would start on the Shannon, and then the Sauvignon, and followed by the Pinot.
I was excited to get the Shannon. We have the 18.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I love the name that it's called. It's called Reckon.
Yeah.
Very clever.
Wow. Yeah, that's a kind of a happy accident pun, really. The Reckon Vineyard is a really cool biodynamic vineyard, some amazing growers in a neat little pocket of Marlborough. So
you'll see it on that map as the golf flag number 7 is that particular vineyard, and it's up in the what we call the Southern Valleys area of the Wairo Valley, our big main grape growing valley in Marlborough. So it's where it all started, but up on the hills it's much more recent planting because there's no water up there, and those hill slopes, which fortunately for us face to the north where the sun is in the southern hemisphere, the slopes have a gentle or steep sort of inclination to the north, and they get saturated by sunlight during the course of the day. It's clay soil. It's very interesting in terms of the contribution to the flavor of the wine, but the biodynamic organic growing there is also a very interesting feature of the Reckon. So yeah, it's quite a unique wine in all respects. Just backing up a bit.
Yeah, should we come back to the Shannon and start with the Astrolabe?
I'll just tell you a wee bit of a history about Astrolabe. I've been a winemaker since way back in about 82. I had my first job in a winery. I'd been a winemaker in big and small wineries in New Zealand, and been a consultant and so forth. So I'm an experienced hand, probably one of New Zealand's oldest sort of still working winemakers. But Astrolabe started some 25 years ago or something as just a little side project. We grew into something bigger than that, and now that's all I do. I've abandoned all my other winemaking projects, and Astrolabe is my passion project. It's now a family business owned entirely by my wife and I, and 2 of my daughters, including Libby and Arabella, who's our marketing person. So I've learned my craft mainly in New Zealand. I studied in Australia, and I've been privileged to make many wines over my career, And I've got to a stage where I really know what I like to drink and what I like to make. And Astrolabe is an opportunity for me to fulfill both those passions, making wine that I think is of high quality, but also wine that I personally find good to drink. And so in the Astrolabe range, that's what you'll see, wine styled to my own flavor preferences and styled in a way that reflects my training and experience, but also my drinking over the years. And my drinking certainly has gravitated towards Europe, I must say, as I've got older and had more available funds to invest in expensive European wines. But I've really become a fan of things like Chablis and the wines of the Loire Valley, like Shannon Blanc and Vouvray and Sauvignon and things like that, and Moselle Rieslings and Burgundies, white and red, Italian wines like Barolos. All those sorts of wine styles inform my winemaking decisions in terms of the way I like to achieve balance and structure. And so what you're seeing with the range we look at today is really how I see Marlborough interacting with these varieties, all fashioned into my own personal, fairly disciplined style. So we're a family business. We're medium-sized. We're entirely about Marlborough. We don't seek fruit from Central Otago or Hawke's Bay or other regions of New Zealand. We think Marlborough is potentially the best place in the world to make aromatic white wine styles and Pinot Noir. And so we find we don't need to look any further than our own fair territory here. So
I don't know if you can see in the background, but it's just a blue sky day today, which is really very standard for Blenheim. There's not a single cloud, which is part of that kind of Marlborough thing. We have really bright light. A lot of people talk about the pure light in Marlborough. Our geography. Do you want to go through some of the Marlborough geography?
I guess for those that haven't been down to Marlborough, and some of you I'm sure have made it down here, but for anyone who hasn't, you have to think of the landscape here as being similar to Northern California, probably especially from sort of Monterey north and through to British Columbia. So that's sort of a landscape. But what really makes us sort of special, I guess, is that we're two long skinny islands out in the middle of the ocean with no big land masses anywhere near. So we don't get any of that continentality. We don't have a big raft of hot air blowing off some, big dry continent. The only thing that sort of really affects us is the temperate ocean temperatures around us, and then occasionally when the wind blows from the south, we get a cold lick of air up from Antarctica off the ice. So although we're at a similar latitude here in Marlborough to a place like Madrid in Spain, we don't have any of that heat because we don't get the the Sirocco winds or whatever that come off the Sahara Desert that come up and make that part of Europe very, very hot. So we're temperate, affected by the ocean, but inside that story, that's sort of the overarching story, but underneath that layer are these huge mountain ranges that are a bit like the mountains of California. We have this big spine of the Southern Alps that runs up the South Island, and that's been thrown up out of the earth by two overlapping alpine faults. So we're in sort of the mix between the Australasian and the Pacific sort of plates here. And we get this huge landform sort of stuff going on. These high mountains act as a natural boundary for us. You'll see the snow on the South Island there, you'll see the snow-capped range there. It runs all the way from Fiordland in the southwest up to Marlborough in the northeast. It's in fact that fault line is the longest naturally occurring straight line in nature. And some of the rocks that started off in Fiordland down in the southwest have ended up in our part of the world as the plates are slid over themselves. But the big interesting feature of that mountain range that's formed is that most of our winds come from the direction of Australia, which is way to the left, to the west of that map. So there's the Tasman Sea between us and Australia, and all the prevailing winds down in our latitudes are the roaring 40s in this part of the Pacific, the South Pacific. The wind whips around the roaring 40s all the way around the globe and comes from the direction of Australia across the sea and picks up all the humidity and moisture off that Tasman Sea. And when it hits the landmass of New Zealand, the air currents are driven up those high mountains of our Southern Alps. And as the air currents go up over the mountains, all that moisture falls on the west coast as huge rainfalls, very much sort of rain measured in yards per annum. And what comes over to us over those mountains is a very dry, turbocharged, often very strong wind we call the nor'wester from the direction it comes from, but it's a föhn wind. It's a sort of a natural phenomenon where there's a pressure change in the air currents with that moisture dropping out, and the wind is accelerated and it's very dry. That comes over to our vineyard areas on the east coast. On the west coast, it's sort of a temperate rainforest. On the east coast, it's dry land, a wee bit like the change you'll see if you've ever driven from Seattle out to the prairie land of eastern Washington state. It's that sort of kind of change in landscape to an extent. We're out here, we're more drier hills, and we have well ventilated canopies in our vineyards. As a result, we don't get the humidity that might cause disease. So that's a big part of our grape growing story. Libby talked about the natural light. We have this high intensity clear light because that sort of drying wind gets rid of all the moisture in the air and blows any hint of pollution away, though we don't really have air pollution to speak of in New Zealand, but it certainly keeps a very low humidity, fresh and clean atmosphere, which means we get this high lux intensity light on our vines. So we have
what's that? Is that?
That's out at Taihoa Vineyard. That's out towards the coast. You've got sea mist coming in off the Pacific Ocean there. You see, that's not all that common. So we took that because it was quite a picturesque photo.
So that's Kikeringu, I guess, is another part of the Astrolabe story. It's the really southern part of Marlborough. So if you've had a lot of Marlborough Sauvignon, you wouldn't necessarily have had much Kikeringu Sauvignon because it's really
it's just not, us.
It's mostly just us that make wine from Kikeringu. So the heading south, basically a little bit more challenging in terms of the geography, much more coastal than most of the Marlborough plantings, but a little bit magic, a little bit.
Most of Marlborough, in fact, is mountainous, and you couldn't plant grapes on it, but the Wairau Valley where it all started does have quite a large area of flatland. And
Simon, we gotta talk about this Shannon Blanc because it's blowing minds down here. David and Maria, what do you think? Come on.
I was just remarking because we've been opening some older Shannons from Loire Valley. We had in 2001 last week, and I have an 87 ready to go and a 59. It's I don't know when we'll ever open that thing, but this has become my favorite white grape because it's so damn versatile, and it's just, there's something going on. I do get the mango, but it's just brilliant. I know it's a little higher alcohol. It's sort of in the range of those some of those Vouvray or those Loire Valley wines, but it's so, I don't know, it's lush. It's just brilliant. I don't know what else to say.
Well, thank you. That's good.
That's what we're going for.
Just keep on with it. I tell you, Shannon is a real passion project for me. When I was a very young winemaker in Gisborne in the North Island of New Zealand, I used to process several thousand metric tons of Shannon Blanc, and it was always overcropped fruit on the very fertile sites, which was mainly providing a very high acid backbone blending wine to go into predominantly Mullaturga and Muscat wine that used to end up as our jug wine style, in fact in bag and what we call bag and box or cask wine. So that was my early days as a winemaker. I worked in a winery that did a lot of that sort of stuff. And Shannon was really nothing more than an acid spine for a very soft acid Mullaturga. But I've always, one day I chanced upon a vineyard up there where they grew Shannon properly and tasted some fruit off the vine, and it was an epiphany for me. It was still to this day, my most memorable grape tasting experiences, this particular Shannon in this particular vineyard in Gisborne. And I promised myself when I got a chance, I'd grow Shannon properly and look after it properly and make it into a fine wine. And in the day when I was using it in Gisborne, it was our second biggest variety in New Zealand, and now it's one of our absolute minorities. But what I like about it, as you say, is the versatility. It's It's a wine style that can be sparkling, it can be sweet, it can be dry, it can be wooded, and pretty much all of those styles will age with grace, and pretty much all of them will improve with aging. And I'm very excited to think you've got a 59 in your cellar, because that's my birth date, and that would be.
Maybe I'll save it, and then when we come to New Zealand, I will bring it, and that's what we'll do. Are you? One more question, and I'll be quiet. Are you a fan of Nicolas Joly? I mean, because it reminds me a little bit of that.
Yeah, I haven't met him or been to his vineyard. I stood on an adjacent vineyard in Sauvigny, overlooking it, just slightly higher up, and looking down on his clos there, and alongside it was fantastic, atmospheric place to be, and I am very interested in that style, probably more so than Vouvray, although I do make a more Vouvray-like Shannon. We don't get to the States at the moment, but I am a fan of his, but there's another chap in Vouvray that I particularly like, called Vincent Careme, Careme. If you look that one up, he's a young chap whose family used to grow grapes and other crops but never made wine, and he became a winemaker. Now uses his family's fruit, and bought an old cave, carved out of limestone in Vouvray, and restored it, and has his own brand. He's married to a South African woman and spends half his life making Shannon Blanc in South Africa and half in Vouvray, and he's got some very nice, well-styled wines. But I love the variety. I think it's the best white for aging, closely followed by Riesling. And to me, it's something that I think will be better. A wine like this, I'm hoping will be better drinking in 20 years or 30 years time than it is today. And that's what I keep in the back of my mind when I make it. And to that end, I agree the alcohol is a bit high. It was a warmer than average year, and we've had 5 of our 10 warmest years in the last 100 in the last 5 seasons. So we're in a sort of pattern of warmer than average years by quite a margin. And I must admit that the ripeness level just got away a wee bit on me, but normally I'd try and be more like 13 to 13 and a half and keep a bit more acidity. But this one does have nice acid, and the reason it's sort of kept that structure and that acidity is because it's all hand-picked fruit, and the fruit is taken as whole bunches to the winery and pressed using a very delicate pressing method, a champagne maker's method of extraction, where you don't macerate the skins, you just very gently apply increasing amounts of pressure and stepwise additions, and get the juice out without rotating and macerating the skins. So you don't extract any of the coarseness out of the skins or the seeds, and you get this very low pH and high acid juice out of the grapes. And I only use the free running juice, the cuvee, if you like. The first 2/3 of what's available in the grape is all that's used in this product. So that keeps the structure tight, even in a high ripe year. It's still got a good acidity and good definition.
I saw Ian's comment there that Shannon's not necessarily known for its aromatics, but this one does kind of jump out of the glass. Do you think that's Marlborough?
I think it's New Zealand in general. New Zealand is a very good area for aromatic white wines, but Marlborough is an area par excellence at that. The other thing I do that it does help that aromatic appeal is I don't clarify the juice. When we take the juice out of that method I was talking to you about, the juice that comes from that, we don't clarify it. We ferment it on what we call grape solid. So it's all the little fleshy bits that are inside the pulp of the berry, not the skins and not the seeds, but all the sort of particulate matter that is part of the constitution of the inside of the berry. That stays in fermentation, and that tends to be tends to help with the flavor. There's a lot of flavor associated with those grape solids, and we ferment on those. I think the vineyard itself is excellent. The method is all about producing a wine that is sort of understated in its youth, but just gathers mass and momentum and texture as it goes on with bottle age. So I make all of my sort of wines of this style to be fairly restrained when they go to the bottle, but they will slowly evolve under screw cap indefinitely, I hope, particularly Shannon. I do really believe this will be magnificent drinking in 30 to 50 years.
It's got a really cool, almost a saltiness to it as well. And it's so refreshing. And I really think the acid and everything you said, the balance is just really on there. I think you were a little tough on the wine, saying it was high in alcohol at all. We don't have another example, but it's perfectly in check here. And,
you don't see it. No, I would agree with you, Ian. You don't have any sense of burn or heat. We obviously having it in a nice filled glass at the moment, but I think
you guys might get accustomed to wines that are 13.5 alcohol, but hearing that California, getting anything under 14.5 is kind of a treat. So
yeah, that's true. I know what you're saying. But it's lovely drinking. We see it as a perfect wine for aging, of course, and it's a brilliant wine with seafood, and it's a hard one to define and to describe to non-Shannon drinkers what to expect, and it sits kind of in a Bermuda Triangle somewhere between Sauvignon and Riesling and maybe Pinot Gris for a lot of tasters who know those varieties a lot better. But it is a cult favorite of the cognoscenti and people that really know their wines. Still is possibly the best bargain wine available on the world market if you want to follow the wines like Nicolas Chailloux. He's not cheap, but the wines of Sauvignon and Vouvray, they are often great wines at a particularly friendly price given the price of some of the other French classic wine regions. So yeah, I do recommend people follow the variety and look at all its forms from all its different homes. We don't make much. We make about 300 or 600 packs of 6 bottles of this per annum. So it is really just a winemaker's indulgence, and we spare a little to get over to your side of the world, but it's not something you'll see down at Bevmo or something like that. It's just not going to happen.
Well, we're happy to have it at Merchant of Wine, and now this is my first time trying it, so I think it will hit the recommendation list very often here. It's quite a good value, and we have, I think, cornered the market buying the small amount that was here. So I'm excited that we just have maybe a 6-pack left. So
yeah,
if anybody is watching this, might want to jump on. All right,
this is Bob. He's just saying hi.
This is my son, Robert.
Very cute. Very cute.
He's got a sister over for a play date, and they're
being a bit rascally. I'm not sure if you can tell that we're getting a little bit distracted because they keep barreling under our legs. But
well, he likes the Zoom.
Yeah.
Do
you want to put Sauvignon in the glass now?
Shall we? Any questions about Shannon before we move on to the Sauvignon?
Yeah. Do you want me to show that slide again?
Yeah, sure. Let's see, where are we?
Let me pull that up.
Better with time in the bottle, it'll get more toasty, honeyed bottle development, a bit more weight, but it will evolve very, very slowly. So, and it will never fall over because there's no disease pressure in the fruit. It's very clean fruit. We haven't over extracted the phenolics, the tannins. It's
that photograph down the bottom right of the slide. That's the intravine planting. So in the vineyard, that's in between the rows there. It's buckwheat flour, I think, isn't it? In that picture?
Some buckwheat and some Allison and a few other bits and pieces there. So so it's a really beautiful. It's a magic spot. It's quite a steep vineyard. 2 little faces that slope down towards a pond on a pretty steep bit of dirt, all clay, all netted to keep the birds away. And occasionally we make a botrytis wine, a noble Shannon from the same vineyard, but only once every 3 or 4 years.
And my mum's book group have their share milking cow at that vineyard.
Yeah, so we often get very nice creamy milk from a Jersey cow that lives on that organic property. So.
All right.
Sauvignon Blanc is where we are. So unlike the there's an old school label. We've changed our branding for those that are a bit bemused by the slide and the bottle I'm showing you. Between the 18 and the 19 vintages, we have now got a new look to our Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, and this is it. Unlike the Rican Shannon that we just had, this is a blend from all over Marlborough. You see on that little localized map that we have different growing vineyards all over Marlborough, including 2 down at Kekaringu in the deep south, which is about an hour's drive from where we are now. And then most of it comes from a valley called the Awatere Valley, which is the second of the major plantings in Marlborough. Now, in New Zealand terms, big enough to be the second biggest grape growing region after the Wairau Valley in Marlborough. So Marlborough is the heartland, the engine room of New Zealand production, and certainly it's the home of Sauvignon Blanc. We believe Marlborough is the home of Sauvignon Blanc outside of its home in the Loire, where it's being grown as Puy-Fumé and Sancerre and the Loire Valley. But we think if you're looking for Sauvignon outside of that area, you come to Marlborough in our view.
So that picture, you can obviously see that's Dad and me, my mum Jane, my sister Arabella, who's our marketing and brand manager, and 2 of my 3 kids here at our home vineyard on my mum's tractor.
Yeah, the wee baby tractor that we used to mow the vineyard. Yeah. So yeah, we live on a little organic property growing Riesling and Chardonnay, and we're not talking about those varieties today, but we're very into the concept of organic growing, and all our wines are made in a very sustainable way. Some vineyards are truly organic and some are on a path to organics, and some are made as close to organics as you can without actually fully committing. But we are trying to progress everything in the organic direction and keep vineyard chemicals and everything else to a minimum. We're a bit lucky with our climate that we don't have a lot of pressure from disease and things like that. So it's a place we can do that successfully. And we also think it's, apart from the not wanting that stuff in our environment, we think the wines that come from that sort of winemaking are better. But the Sauvignon Blanc is our flagship wine. This Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc is the wine you'll see the most in the US. And it's widely available in places like, I hope, in Ian's store and throughout California and the US. We've been over there since I think about the 2012 with our 2010 vintage. We're just about to roll from the 19 in your market to the 20, so we have shipped 20 to the US. So you may see a vintage change after this, but I can tell you that the 20 is equally as good drinking as this one we have here.
So this is in the US has been mostly a restaurant proposition, hasn't it? I think obviously coronavirus is shifting those things a little bit, but it's kind of a new thing for it to be available in retail. But it's done really well in the American market. It's been well received.
We tend to handpick our retail opportunities. We aim for the restaurants and the fine wine retail scene, and we can't be everything to everybody, and we really know that who our customers are, and our customers tend to be the people who know a bit more about wine, and will seek out wines from the people with the knowledge and the passion to curate a nice selection of wines for sale. So we look for those fine wine retailers in general that will be able to offer our wine, which is not a household name by any extent in the US. But we want it to become a word of mouth wine that people taste and tell their friends about. That's how we've grown the brand throughout the world. I
actually found out about you guys a long time ago. There was a young lady living here in Los Angeles. She went to USC. She was actually an Olympic athlete, I think. Andrea McBride. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, she was the first person who mentioned your name, and then I got to try the wine shortly after that, and a version of this one, and it's remarkable how the style, like 10 years later, still rings the same bell. It's just so clean and so signature Astrolabe, and that's really cool.
Yeah, that's important, Ian. Thank you. For me, because Marlborough might not be a hugely common. Marlborough Sauvignon might not be a big category yet in the States, although it's growing pretty quickly. But in this part of the world, in some markets, it's a very mature category, and there's a lot of Marlborough Sauvignon out there. So for me, the most important thing is that when people try this wine, they think of it first as an Astrolabe wine, and then second as a Marlborough wine, and having a sense of the house style is important. And the way I achieve that is, we have our very carefully curated vineyard growing sites all over Melbourne, as you see on that map. All those sites have different soils and different little local climates. There's only one person who makes all the picking decisions, all the winemaking decisions, and that's me. So it's very easy for us at Astrolabe to produce a consistent wine because we have the same vineyard sites every year. We have the same person who's going out to the vines and tasting the fruit and working out when to pick, and the same person overseeing the fermentation, and more critically, I think, the same person who finishes the wine off and balances it and puts it into a bottle and the taste that I like. So it really is tuned to my palate. And I've found as I got older, this is part of getting old, you find that as you get old, your wine experience and a lot of your experiences are more about, can be summarized as less is more. You want refinement and elegance, and you want a drinkability, balance, and things like that. You don't want necessarily big spikes of one thing or other, a huge acid hit or a big passion fruit or a sweaty note or something. You want integration and harmony. And I've certainly come around to that sort of view as a winemaker and a wine drinker. And Marlborough is a place that produces bucket loads of fruit flavor. You don't really have to go overboard. You don't have to sort of encapsulate that all in a glass and throw it at somebody. I'd like to think that these wines, our Sauvignon, our flagship Marlborough Sauvignon blend, always has lovely layers of things that people can find as they savor the glass. But essentially it is a dry version of the style, about the driest on the market, the least sugar on the market. But the acid is tame, so it's not all about the searing acidity. It's about acid supporting a lovely fruit length and about lovely layers of green spectrum aromas and flavors that come through on the palate. So it's all about, for me, all about the drinker. And my drinker is a refined, more experienced drinker who prefers a drier, more mineral style, as I do. And so I'm really looking after that part of the market. If somebody likes my wine this year, they'll undoubtedly like it next year and the year after. And generally speaking, if they like my Sauvignon, they like my Pinot and my Shannon and my Riesling, because they're all kind of styled using my own calibration and not with any external reference point. So I don't follow the shows or the magazines. I don't sort of go off on a tangent. I keep myself really disciplined around my house style, so that the people who have supported me in the past will be confident that they can rely on my wines in the future. The
way he makes it, I'm not sure, maybe just expand a little bit, of all those vineyards and all the pockets within those vineyard properties, which are picked not necessarily at the same time. So we'll do lots of little picks and harvests. Then they will all be made, all of those picks will be made into their own Sauvignon. And then at the end of that harvest process, Dad will blend across those many different Sauvignons that he's made to kind of come to this perfect, harmonious, balanced Astrolabe house style Sauvignon. So this wine is not a single vineyard. We're not going for showing off something particularly intense about one particular site or something esoteric necessarily. It's classic, it's balanced, and it's because of that process where he's literally kind of alchemy style blend. How many this year? 30?
About 30 wines that I make every year of Sauvignon. And I suppose the other thing that's interesting about our setup is I've organized our business, so that we make about pretty much twice as much wine as we need to put into our bottles, and I sell what I don't use off to other winemaking friends. But what I try and do every year is cherry pick what I've made to make the wine that looks most like last year's wine. It's not always about the most intense parcels. Sometimes I sell on some very outstanding wines, but if they don't really fit the house style, they don't fit. And I also make sure that every year my wine at the 80% level reflects my vineyard sources. So I don't go off, I don't get seduced by one particular vineyard and one particular valley and say, well, that's fantastic this year, let's make it all out of that.
To be fair, we make about 22 different wines. So we do that as well sometimes.
Yeah.
Not for this particular wine.
Not this one. This is my most important wine. This is the pinnacle of my winemaking every year. the hardest thing I have to do every year. It takes all my accumulated winemaking experience and wine drinking experience to put this wine together. And if you were to imagine that, you come to the blending bench, you've got 30 wines in front of you, and you know that the volume represented by those 30 wines, you need about 50 to 60% of it to go into this wine. If you gave that task to 20 different winemakers, you get 20 different outcomes, all based on their own preferences and experience. So blending at this level becomes a very personal thing, and as a winemaker, it's one of the highly rewarding things, because you can really stamp your own mark on it. My single vineyard wines are almost made in the vineyard. I just husband them through the process into the bottle and try and capture what's happened in the vineyard. Obviously try and grow it the right way and pick it at the right time and all that jazz. But when you come to doing a blend like this, you can really add another layer over the wine. It's not just about the vineyard itself, it's also about the winemaker's personality and preferences and experience. So for me, it's a real joy. And it's a real joy for me to get feedback on the wine. I get a lot of people that come to me and say, well, I stopped drinking Sauvignon Blanc. I got sick of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, but I tried yours and I'm back drinking it again. Or other people said, I never used to like Sauvignon Blanc, but I've tried yours and I like it. And a lot of that comes down to that, just that extra time spent at the end on the balance. I've got lovely vineyards from all over the region that are, and we do have the ability to put the Kekaringu fruit in at about 20% of the blend, which no one else in Marlborough can do. So that is another unique sort of thing for us. But I think my old wise head just spends a bit more time on that last task before bottling, whereas I think a lot of other younger winemakers do everything else right, but they hurry it through into the bottle and don't spend enough time sort of just looking at that balance between alcohol and sugar and acid and pH and the weight of the fruit to get it just so. So for me, just so is all important, and that's what I hang my hat on, if you like. So as I say, it's probably the driest Sauvignon you'll see in your market. So there's less sugar, but it has a nice rich and fruit sweetness sort of comes through, although it's not informed by sugar from grapes. But it has, as I got older, I can't drink quite as much high acid wines as I used to be able to, and I'm always conscious of that. One of the problems of the Marlborough winemaker selling wine to the US drinkers, particularly if you're in California today, when you're a winemaker down here, all of the fruit is high acid. When you're going out around the vines like I do, I'm traveling around, maybe spending about 4 or 5 hours leading into the harvest, traveling about 100 to 120 miles a day, getting around my vineyard sites, tasting the fruit to see what they're getting ready to pick. That fruit is intensely acidic, even by our standards, but by your standards, just out of this world acid, if you're a Californian. And I think the problem for winemakers is you work in this category, your grapes are acidic, your fermentations are acidic. You get this really high threshold tolerance for acidity that just doesn't happen for your average drinker in a warmer climate, or in fact in most other climates, because the acid drops out a lot during the fermentation process anyway. So winemakers aren't the best judge of a harmonious acid balance, in my view. And I'm always thinking about the drinker, and the drinker may be in Southern California, or they might not be used to their red delicious apples having a zing to them. They might be just sweet and round. Even our apples and our pears and our citrus, they're all much more tart than say the Californian equivalent. So
Lisa has a question. Do we work with Ruth Pretty?
We have in the past. We haven't for a number of years, but we used to do quite a few things with Ruth. She used to use our wine in her cooking school. I think she's still active. And Paul, her husband, yes, but I'm not sure whether we've done anything for a few years. She's a great servant to our restaurant trade and our teaching of the hospitality trades.
Is it meets per Sunday afternoon with girlfriends drinking wine, catching up on life red wine.
Yeah.
Not too acidic or too grapefruity.
Yeah, I think it needs to be refreshing. It needs to encapsulate all those lovely green spectrum flavors. It has to be refreshing, and after a hot day to lay the dust down and get you in the mood.
I just poured our Pinot to keep Dad on track.
Yeah. But, within all that context of refreshing, it has to also be drinkable, and it has to be a wine that you can reach for the second glass without having to feel you battle through the first. So I like to think my drinkers have finished the bottle before they realize, and they think, oh gosh, is that already gone? You know, that's I feel like I've failed if I haven't nailed that.
You did. That was great. And it is really, really refreshing. It keeps you light on your feet, kind of keeps calling you to pull another pour. I think I poured myself 3 pours.
Yeah.
Really, really tantalizing on the palate, and just really wonderful to smell. I mean, just kind of wakes you up. It's like I think New Zealand wines are almost like the yin, and an espresso is the yang. You know, it's kind of wakes you up in just a big stylistic way. But this one has so much restraint, and I love the fact that you said it's a low sugar, but you know, that results in a wine that has that softness of impact, that real subtle hint of that New Zealand, you know, almost like a hot brand. You can tell it's from Marlborough, but it still has that nice soft sizzle. So
you certainly need, I think with my wines, people need to know they're from Marlborough. This is my youngest granddaughter.
Look at that look.
Yeah, she's been playing out.
How you doing?
Her mother.
Can you say hi, Betty Boo? Hi.
Hi there. You are adorable.
Yeah, she's go back to her grandmother's. Who's her grandmother was doing Libby's job about 1.5 years ago. So Libby came through and kicked my wife out of the general manager's seat, and my wife now looks after some of the sort of compliance and entertainment sides of the business, and does a lot of babysitting duties. So
that's very important, especially with kids that cute.
Yeah, no, she's very cute. She's the apple of my eye, that particular one. They're all good, but she is I'm very, very fond of her. And just reminding you that the 19 vintage we just tasted will be rolling out and into the 20 soon, but as I said earlier, you should find no appreciable shock between vintages. They should merge into each other very nicely. So here comes my granddaughter back again.
I just took you inside.
We get another visit. All right.
Too speedy.
So Pinot Noir.
When you run your skip.
Oh, cool.
My skip and my run.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Right. So Pinot is about the only red variety we feel in our cool climate in Marlborough that makes sense to hang a hat on. We do have a little bit of Syrah in the ground, or Shiraz, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't made wine from it yet, but that's an exciting sort of new thing around the corner, and we think it will work at low cropping levels. But Pinot Noir is the sort of intuitively sensible red variety to do in our cold climate. I always like to often mention to people why we grow different varieties in different places, and people have probably tweaked to this themselves, but for those that haven't really given it much thought, why do we grow Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay and Riesling and Gewürztraminer and Pinot Gris and Gruner Veltliner and Albarino and Marlborough and Pinot Noir? It's because we've sought out classic wine varieties that come to their full pinnacle of ripeness in the middle of or early part of fall, or autumn as we call it. So when you're a winemaker, you want your varieties to ripen at that time of the year. You want them to have a long growing season. You want them to come to ripeness in a time of the year where it's not searingly hot. And also you want them to get ripe before the first frosts arrive or whatever. So in a place like, for argument's sake, the Barossa Valley or inland Australia, grape growing wise, you select varieties that are late maturing varieties that require a lot of heat units to get fully ripe. And they'll because they take a bit longer in that warmer climate, they will ripen, come to full ripeness in a cooler part of the year. In an area like New Zealand or Germany, down the Rhine or somewhere like that, or Burgundy or Chablis, where the season's shorter, you need to seek varieties that will fully ripen in a shorter season. So that's what we've done. Our climate lends itself to all those aromatic whites and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir.
David Camps just asked a question about the difference between Martinborough Sauvignon Blanc compared to Marlborough.
Well, some years are very, very similar. I've had some years, particularly from a maker called Astrolabe, or Palliser, I should say. I've had over the years tried many of their Sauvignon Blancs and been unsure whether it's tasting them blind, whether they're Marlborough or Wairarapa. And occasionally in Nelson, which is our neighbouring area to the west in the South Island, you'll also see the same. But I think what sets Marlborough apart is you get the Marlboroughness every year. As some of those other regions, it's once every 2 or 3 years you'll get a sort of more of a Marlborough intensity. And I think what we have here is a slightly, we have a more even, predictable climate. We have the perfect balance of sunshine without too much frost and frost damage or rain damage. And we have the soils that seem to be, that suit the Sauvignon. But yes, you can easily be fooled time to time by sporadic examples of wines from either Martinborough or from Nelson.
What about in a classic Martinborough? Yeah, if you a classic Martinborough Sauvignon and a classic Marlborough Sauvignon.
I think ours tend to be just a bit more aromatic. Sometimes the Martinborough one's a bit more structural, but that does come down a bit to the producer and the winemaker himself or herself.
Martinborough is pretty, I guess it's got good international reputation, but in terms of volume, it's really little. So when you're talking about Martinborough, you're really talking about kind of boutique, higher end production. So it's like kind of a subset of Marlborough production as well. If you were kind of comparing Martinborough with Marlborough's boutique wine industry rather than some of our big players, I guess, is the other thing. So, and
there's a huge focus on Pinot Noir in Martinborough. That's what they first on the world. What they do is very good aromatic wines like Pinot Gris, Dry River, and great place to follow, and escarpment wines, good Pinots from Larry McKenna. So there's one of New Zealand's marquee sort of grape growing regions, but the Sauvignons is almost an irrelevance because there's hardly any of it in for us, but they can make very fine examples. But I think we just probably can do it more reliably every year just through the benevolent seasons that we get here that really lend themselves to Sauvignon Blanc. I would say that just because the Sauvignon Blanc's a big thing in Marlborough, it's not necessarily the best thing. You know, our climate is the reason why it's good for Sauvignon Blanc makes it perfect for Riesling or Chardonnay or Albarino, which we make Shannon Blanc, Pinot Noir. So it is just that long growing season, sunny days without too much heat to bake the flavour away, cool crisp nights, plenty of time for the flavour to accumulate on the vine without the heat to bake it out again, and just the high quality light which seems to give us a real zing to our flavour intensity. Those are the Marlborough story really, and then it comes down to winemakers and vineyards after that. Pinot is a fantastic red. If you can only make one red successfully in a region, you'd be a mug not to choose Pinot if you could. It's the best red in the world in my view, and I know that's hard for people in Zin country, some of you, and California cabs and villas and so forth, but what I like about Pinot Noir is that it's such a food-friendly wine style that can go with pretty much everything we like to eat in the restaurant scene these days. You know, it's beautiful with anything from tuna through Asian duck styles to game and lamb and venison, all that sort of stuff. It's just a versatile red wine that does form a bridge between white wine drinkers and red wine drinkers, and is a refuge for heavy red wine drinkers that are finding they're getting knocked around by the bigger styles and looking to ease off a bit. Just a perfect drinking red wine. And it just so happens that New Zealand in general, from about Martinborough, the Wairarapa south through the South Island, is perfect Pinot country, and Marlborough I think is absolutely a smashing place to grow the variety. It's our most early ripening grape. The crop levels we grow it at has it ripening usually in our mid to late March, which is our autumn down in the southern hemisphere, our fall. Whereas some of the other varieties like Sauvignon Blanc would sneak into the second or third week of April. Pinot Noir is very early. And one thing about Pinot Noir, we know if we grow it on the right site, crop it at the right level, we're going to get it ripe every year. But one thing we've learned, or I've learned, is that we don't want to get it overripe. So for us, the big mission with Pinot Noir is to do our best to try and avoid making a big red wine out of Pinot. We're trying to make an elegant, full-bodied red, but we don't want it to be muscular or tannic. We want it to be sort of svelte and supple and rewarding in the mouth without being heavy. And we want it to be aromatic, have good acidity to match food and to linger in the palate. So it's sort of sits on its own in the pantheon of red wines. Maybe closest relative would be, Barolo and something like that probably. But in the world of red grape varieties, it's pretty much out there on its own in terms of its tannin structures.
Sandra just said she likes this Pinot a lot, so they like this Pinot a lot.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that. Marlborough's a great untold Pinot story, and what's happened in Marlborough that sort of held our Pinots back from sort of more wide acclaim, I think, is that we're a bit later to the story. We had a false start with Pinot many years back where we planted champagne sort of clones of Pinot Noir. We planted them on the valley floor on the Wairo, where it's more suitable for Sauvignon Blanc. And we planted the wrong planting densities. It wasn't the right material. We didn't grow it properly or make it properly.
Classic New World wine story.
Yeah, so we tended to pull it all out. And I thought that didn't work. Let's pull it out. And we got Sauvignon Blanc mainly back in where it was. And more recently, in the last 20 years or so, we've been able to reticulate water around our dry valleys in the Southern Valleys region of the Wairo, where the same area where the Rican Shannon came from. We've been able to get water enough to establish young vines in their planting phase and get them to survive through the first 2 or 3 summers by giving them a minimum amounts of water. So all of a sudden, with that advent of the water to those dry areas, we've been able to get the right clones. So by the time we got around to doing that, we had the right planting material from France. We planted them in the right way, we're growing them properly, and we're making the wine properly. So everything in Marlborough has come together in the last few years, where the vines have now got to an age where they're fulfilling their potential. So, but we're a bit late to the party in terms of Martin Borough and Central Otago. We're the latecomers to the Marlborough, third of the Pinot story in New Zealand. But it's perfect climate. We've got great soils. We've got the right winemaking and viticultural expertise. And so you'll start to see a lot more buzz around Marlborough Pinots. And I think what we have to offer in particular in the New Zealand context is a brighter, redder, more vibrant style of Pinot, less of that dark, broody, and brambly stuff, and more of a brighter, more vital sense of live fruit at harvest, if you like.
Hey Simon, I have it's different. I don't know if this is a descriptor or not in the purest sense, but I really get this. It's like almost fresh strawberry earth.
Yeah.
Real.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I know what you're saying, and there's a sort of a hint of quite freshly made and unoxidized sort of strawberry conserve. It's like that. It is like there's a strawberry note there and a little red cherry stuff going on. I've got to tell you that since about 2011 or even 2009, every year I'm trying to pick my fruit earlier. It's quite a hard thing as a winemaker when you're out tasting the berries. The default safety sort of approach is to pick over ripe fruit. It's quite hard to get yourself on the edge and pick the fruit when you're not quite sure that it's fully ripe and you're worried about kind of weedy, herbaceous notes in your red wine. But I have found that through experience that if I wait till I'm fully confident that the fruit is just so, then it's too late. And I'm starting to capture some of that more pruny, jammy, porty kind of character into the wine. So every year I try and steel myself and screw up my courage and go out there and pick a little earlier than the year before. And of course, since the 16 vintage, we've now, we've got the 20 in barrel at the moment. So there's a few years of Pinot under the bridge since this one that's in front of you. And every year I'm trying to capture more of that redder fruit, including the strawberry and the raspberry.
So the winemaking, David's got a question. Well, firstly, what clones are we using?
Yeah, well,
Should be quick answers because this is
Yep.
a three for you.
yeah, sure. So the clones we're using are predominantly a clone called 777, then 667, a clone we call in New Zealand Able, which is a nice, somebody brought back some material from Domain Romani Conti and that's
Smuggled it in a boot,
smuggled it in.
apparently.
So before our quarantine system was as robust as it should have been. So that's the Able clone. Something we call 10x5 here, which I'm not sure what the equivalent name in the US would be. A little bit of UCD Davis clone 5, or Pommard as it's often known here as well. 114 and 115, and just another couple of sort of Dijon clones that have just come into the mix, but not on this particular wine now. So driven by 777, 667, and 115, and 10x5, and a little bit of Able.
Any stem inclusion?
I've started doing that a wee bit, but this wine in front of you has none of that. But I'm a bit of a stem skeptic because of our cooler climate. Often our stems look pretty green and challenging to include in the fermentation at harvest. But some of my best winemaking buddies are total stem converts and the high apostles of the stem fermentation. And I'm being a little convinced to put my toe in the water, but it's slowly catch a monkey for me. So I'm fiddling around with it, but it wouldn't have been a major part of my wines even up to the 19 bottling. So it's a new thing for me, and I'm
still nervous.
I'm still nervous. I'm still a skeptic.
Does the Pinot have aging potential? Better to drink it now.
Well, the way I make it, I like to think it has a good acid structure, and the fruit's all clean. There's no botrytis. It's not over extracted. I tend to not use the heavier pressings fraction in the wine. It's not overworked in the fermentation either by the punch down. So it has a nice sort of structure, I think lends itself to aging. Of course, in New Zealand, we predominantly bottle under the screw cap, which itself extends the ageability of these wines. So I would tend to think that this wine is pretty much at peak drinking and will probably be peak drinking for a foreseeable few years. But if I bought a case of it, I wouldn't sit on the whole case of it for the next 50 years. I'd probably be drinking it fairly steadily between now and the next sort of 5 or 6 years.
There is this is 2016. This is our current release of Astrolabe Pinot. So Astrolabe does release a little later than some people. There's a lot of pressure to get wine right out the door after vintage, but so you could get almost, you could be certainly drinking a Marlborough at 19 Pinot at the moment, but we reckon it's a bit jumping the gun a bit.
Yeah, I think the wine gets a little more elegant in the mouthfeel and stuff. I don't like to overfine, so I rather not extract stuff. So a lot of my white wines, in fact, all of my white wines don't have any finings, all those protein-based fining agents that you might hear winemakers talk about, like egg white or gelatin or fish blood, fish bladder extract, isinglass, or casein. All those things that are made out of proteins and are used to take out the tannins and phenolics out of wines. I don't use those in any of my white wines, and the only wines of mine that get fined at all are the Pinots, and they only get a very tiny bit of egg white.
It's like a quarter of an egg white per barrel?
Yeah, if you imagine a 225 litre barrel, which I guess is in English gallons is about a 50 gallon one, it's probably about 60 gallons US or something like that. A typical wine barrel, we use about a quarter of an egg white per barrel. So it's a minuscule amount of fining. So my wines tend to always be slightly undefined, and they do round out. I like to leave a wee bit of tannin for structure in the Pinot. So with time in the bottle, it does tend to get a little rounder, more svelte and silky. So I think 4 or 5 years aging is probably perfect.
Defined.
Yeah, defined. So I am conscious that over the years I've made some big robust reds out of Pinot Noir in my foolish youth, and it's just to me that's the antithesis of Pinot Noir. It's counterintuitive to take the one red that you can make into a more elegant and style and try and make a big red out of it. We get it ripened early enough, we can make it as big and jammy as you like. It could be the equivalent of a basket press Shiraz if you wanted it to be that. So and some wines have been produced in New Zealand like that, but that's not what the point of difference of Pinot Noir is. And we think Marlborough and Pinot can combine to give people a lovely choice and a very food friendly choice of red to accompany their meals.
Well, fantastic. All the wines are showing really, really well. And David, you guys did Maria make dinner tonight?
I saw that come up.
Yeah, she actually, of course, she's the Sicilian. She knows what she's doing over there. Cod. We had cod tonight, and it was brilliant with the Shannon.
I bet. Very good.
Yeah, it's just the wines are just fresh and beautiful and fun. And it's like you said, 2016 is I think it's unusual for a new Pinot Noir, isn't it? Usually you're getting the new. It must be is there neutral oak involved or something? Or
I tend to use it's all sort of center of France tight grain oak, and I tend to sort of have a mixture of brand new through to about 4th or 5th fill barrels, so there's not a huge amount of new oak in the program, and every year a little less new oak as I'm trying to have the wine be more about the fruit than the wood. But I think the wine does lend itself to aging and gets more grace for it. I wouldn't say it'll go on forever, because we just don't have history with our Pinot production to be able to say hand on heart that we've got 30-year-old wines in our cellars that are still magnificent, because we haven't been doing it long enough. But certainly I think this wine is as drinkable as it's ever been, and possibly more drinkable than it was last year or the year before. So I wouldn't like to think you pushed the boat out too much and left it for too long after this, but it's good drinking right now.
Right in the pocket right now. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. When Simon was on the Zoom over the summer, there was a bird just going crazy, and it was really nice actually to hear it, because we're all been so stuck inside and all that stuff. But you guys have obviously built a wonderful sanctuary for your lifestyle and your brand, and it's great. Are people able to visit?
We do tastings by appointment when life returns to some sort of normality, and you people are able to travel the vast distances that are required to get here. I do recommend it. New Zealand is just a fantastic destination, mainly for the scenery, but the culture's nice. There's no history, no architecture to speak of, but the lifestyle and the glorious scenery and the food and wine scene and the coffee is all worth coming down for.
Good.
And we're happy to host people. We have visitors here at our home vineyard, also at our office. And,
we're not formally set up with a cellar door. We don't tend to sort of encourage bus loads of people coming through from the cruise ships, but when people have sought us out that have heard about us or want to learn more about us and approach us, we're more than happy to do private tasting. So let us know if you're coming down our way. At the moment, though, you have to spend 3 weeks in a fairly indifferent hotel before you can get out.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would mind that so much. That wouldn't be too bad.
If you get a long enough visa to make it all worthwhile, and some of the young ones that were kind of trapped here by COVID have managed to extend their visas. These travelers from all around the world, the adventurous young types, and we need them to help pick the fruit and the apples as well as the grapes. And they've all tended to find work, and they, I think, are finding life here better than maybe what it would be back in Italy or Spain or Ireland or maybe parts of the US. They're free to go to the bars and socialize with their friends, and free to enjoy pretty much a young person's lifestyle down here. So they have been very keen to keep on renewing the visas, and the government here has become much more lenient on rolling over those sort of
travel visas,
travel, holiday, job, work visa type things that have been down here. It's not the easiest place to get into unless you've got millions of dollars. We welcome your money. Yeah.
Well, harvest is probably a month and a half away now, yeah?
Yeah, we are thinking it's going to be a bit earlier. We've had a string of early seasons due to our string of hot, comparatively hot years. And because the fruit this year is a little lighter, the crop's a little lighter, because of various sort of near frost events we had through the late spring, we expect that we will get some blocks will ripen very early, even compared to normal, just because of the low fruit load on the vine. So the combination of an early bud burst way back in sort of September, and a relatively early season as defined by growing degree days, our sort of winemakers, viticulturists speak for sort of the seasonal growing accumulated heat. We are ahead of the 8 ball with that, but we're also it's going to be a double whammy with the turbocharged effect with the lighter crop. So we could well be harvesting in early March some of our lighter crops of Pinot Noir, I should think. So it means I have to get a bit more organized than I normally would at this time of the year. I have to get out of my summer stupor and our holiday sort of zone and start thinking about making sure we're all set up to welcome the fruit into the winery. So it's always exciting and it's always something to look forward to, but I probably won't be going to look at the vines from a fruit flavor point of view until late February. I'm starting to go and taste some of the berries from then, taking Arabella with me if her back gets better.
My sister Arabella. Yeah.
And she's sort of at my side as a bit of a trainee apprentice type winemaker. And
I stay in the office.
Yeah, and Libby will keep the wheels of industry turning in the office. So yeah, we're looking forward to the harvest, but we're quite happy to enjoy these hot summer. To us, this is a really warm day. It's 27 C, which are Celsius, which would be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm guessing. Very pleasant sort of weather. We had a sort of a 30-degree day yesterday, so it was about 85, I suppose, or something. So for us, it's warm, but when we come to the harvest period, that goes back substantially to kind of the low 20s and sometimes down to 12 or 10 or something, sometimes overnight to about 2 degrees centigrade or something during the harvest. So
What time is the sun going down, Simon?
pretty late in this. We're reasonably south here, and for us, it's the sun. I think we're about 43 or 44 latitude here. We would be
9:30. 9:30.
Yeah, 9:30, probably a nice sort of twilight, even through to close to 10. Down further south in Vicargo at the bottom of the South Island, they could be playing tennis at about 10:30, probably outdoor, open court without lights. So it's yeah, we have the lovely lingering light in this time of the year, which is makes life pretty good. It gets cold though; it doesn't stay warm. It might be light, but it's not necessarily warm until that night.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it is always special to spend some time with you guys, and I think everyone's been super stimulated by not only the wine but the great conversation. So I want to thank you guys for all the time, and want to let you guys get back to your grandkids or your kids, Libby.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, they're just playing on the lawn at the moment. I was just watching my mum hanging out with them, so I should go take over and probably give them some dinner shortly.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Ian, for the opportunity.
Yeah, so nice to see people in America. Wish we could be there for real, but
yeah, and best of luck with how everything unfolds over the next 10 or 15 days and everything that's crazy in your world now, and hope it all settles down and everybody is kind to each other, and everything sort of kind of heals up in your political landscape and so forth.
Until then, drink some good wine.
Yeah, hope our wines can be some comfort until that might happen. So.
Well, if things don't go well, we'll be packing into a small container and we'll be coming down to New Zealand.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Have a great evening.
Cheers. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.